Hello there, commanders, and welcome to another Total War Arena discussion video, I guess. What I want to discuss in this video is AI, but AI behavior in a PvP battle specifically. Leave out how it behaves in PvE, really nobody cares, and it's fine there, as I've said multiple times in the past. It serves its purpose in PvE. But in PvP, it was always present, even before the change to matchmaking that now fills in the remaining spots in a PvP battle if there is not enough human players to fill in a full 10v10 battle within a short enough period of time, right? So let's leave that out of the discussion because, as I said, AI was present in PvP battles even before, if somebody disconnected, for example, right? And then if AI takes over a disconnected person, it still behaves the same way it behaves in PvE. And the point of this video is to talk about how AI should, why and how the AI should behave differently. Wait, yeah, that still works. English is a very flexible language, so there we go. It still works. AI should behave differently in PvP compared to how it behaves in PvE. So in PvP, right now, obviously it behaves the same way as it does in PvE, and while that change sort of made sense for PvE, they damped down the AI so that noobs that are, okay, let's not call them noobs, newbies, new players, right? It's part of the onboarding process. They give them stupid bots that they have their arms cut off so that they don't use their commander abilities and even unit abilities. They scarcely use them anyway. Let's just go somewhere. There's no point in me blob chatting. So they defend points like that, right? So a smart cavalry player cannot just sneak around and back up D and then go and back up the base and win the battle in 3 minutes, which is what was happening. People were farming tier 10 battles like that. But they removed tier 10 PvE battles anyway. Now they're just only up to tier 3. So nobody's going to farm PvE battles on tier 3 and back up with cavalry all the time like that, because it just doesn't make sense if you're there to grind, because the XP you would get out of it is minuscule compared to what you would get from PvP farming. Unless you really wanted to feel good about yourself and buff up your win rate in your profile, I guess, then you can do that. But still, let's say that's beyond the point. Let's leave the PvE entirely out of it. Let's focus on PvP, right? So on PvP, you're not going to have a team full of bots, so you can just push the responsibility of defending the point onto the players, points onto the players, right? And AI will just push forward as it did before, and I will show you because we'll play literally the same battle but with the old AI on an older patch before the change was introduced. And AI can then do, yeah, something like this. Just ranged instead of discovery over here as well, but yeah. If you remember my patch 4.16, or just patch notes video, I think that's what I call them. We actually did go into a random PvP battle that was happening, and there was a situation where there was one point being defended by AI, and it just so happened that it was defended by 6 ranged units, and the human cavalry player just came in and backed up it anyway, right? So you're gonna have 2 solutions: either just have AI push, all AI players just push forward and leave the defending points to human players. If you have a full 10v10 human battle, the human players not always defend their points. They just sometimes just push with everything, and then they sometimes get back up. So I don't see a problem with AI doing exactly the same and sort of simulating that human behavior. And then whether to defend point or not, that decision is left to the human players. So that's one way to make it work. The other way to make it work is to change the AI to an iteration that we didn't have before, which is also something I have brought up in one of my videos. At this point, I honestly have no idea which one. So as you can see, the AI, they just cut off their arms. It just stares there at me. Oh, now it walks forward. Took them a while to figure it out. Scorcher. Oh no. It missed. Oh, it cut off my retreat, right? Yeah, okay. And now it just stares there at me, right? Because that's how dumb down the AI. Because that change to make it so non-aggressive was there to, you know, help onboarding the players, because it was an actual issue in the first patches. The team of average human players could not beat a team of bots. And I'm not exaggerating here, because what bots would do in the previous iteration, they would just always push. And always pushing is a really good tactic into the war arena. It's not maybe just the smartest tactic to just mindlessly push a point, but it's a fairly good tactic. And if my random human teammates were to do the same in my battles, I would be very often happier than what they usually do, right? This is one of the best things you can do. Just pushing forward. And AI does it mindlessly, so it's never going to be very good, but it's not also not going to be very bad. So it was just okay. It was somewhere in the middle, right? After all, it's AI and it's just there to fill in a gap. But the problem starts where it just camps, like for example, like this. It's all recorded live. Trust me. I'm clicking here, right? I'm using my abilities. Look, yep. Sorry, let's not do that. So yeah, AI just does this. B is locked. There's no point of having a single unit over here. And there were 6 units there, and now AI just said, okay, well, let's use 3 of the units, but the 3 units are still going to be here and be useless. That's a big problem, because that happens in PvP battles. And if that happens in PvP battles, it kind of ruins the PvP battle if the bots are this stupid. Right? Because not only they're being told to defend a point, but then the AI is not smart enough to recognize that this point is locked, and if it wants to defend a point, it should move over to the next not locked point. Right? So either they need to change that logic. Well, they definitely need to change that logic, I can tell you that. Not either. That's the least they should do to start fixing the issue. But as I said, maybe they should just tell AI to all push. But if you wanted to have an AI, let's say you want to encourage and kind of teach players through AI, because this is PvP after all. So make the PvP AI kind of good, right? And then worse players in the PvP battles, and they can look at AI and it's like, AI did this and I struggled against it. Maybe I'll copy that behavior, because it's essentially the same thought process as if they faced a good player. They face a good player, they get wrecked by a good player, and they see, okay, that good player did this and this to me. I'll try to either do the same next thing to an enemy, or I'll try to analyze what I did wrong and how I could counter that behavior in the future, right? So AI can serve the exactly same purpose that way. So how would make it actually good at defending points? Well, first of all, definitely tell them not to defend locked points, because it's literally pointless. But what I would do is add a few conditions as to defending the point. So for example, definitely get rid of ranged units defending a point. Alright, so just write a check. If unit type equals ranged unit, as in slingers, archers, etc., a defending point is a no-no. You go push forward. And then put one infantry unit on top of a point. Not 3, not 6, 1. One infantry unit on top of a point, and also only if there isn't one there already. Because a lot of human players are campers, and they like to camp, and we just need to accept it, even though it's not necessarily always the best thing to do. Sometimes it is, so it's sort of fine. After all, it's a human decision to make, right? so we cannot really fault somebody for making the wrong decision in a game. Right? People have the right to be noobs. So if there is a camper that would just like to camp on top of a point, deploy his stakes, look very cool, let him do that, but then don't overcommit yet another unit of AI pointlessly, right? So just perform a check. Is there a unit? Doesn't matter. Is it an AI unit? Is it a human unit? That is out of question anyway. So if there is a unit on top of a point, don't put another one there. Melee infantry, that is. Because if a human player would decide to camp the point with a ranged unit, that would be really, really extremely stupid. And if AI could correct that mistake, sort of, then that would be nice, I guess. So yeah, write a check so that ranged units don't defend the point, and also write a check so that there's only one infantry unit defending a point, whether it is human or AI. Right, so if a human is on top of a point, or let's say within a vicinity of X meters around the point, because they may just go around and deploy stakes like slightly in front of the point, like in this choke point and this choke point, instead of here and here, trying to get it around the point somewhat, right? So let's say you camp on D, right? You want to camp on D, so you would deploy stakes, one set of stakes here, one set of stakes here, and one set of stakes here, and then you would come back to the point and sit on top of it, if you are a camper. And then AI, if it performs just a simple check, is a unit of a point, it will be like, oh, it isn't because it went forward to deploy stakes. Okay, let me go back and defend the point. But then human players deploys the stakes and goes back to the point, and the AI is like, oh, okay, point is being defended, let me move forward, right? And then maybe an enemy comes to the camper, starts attacking him, the camper decides to walk outside of the point to prevent the attacker from denying the point gain, which they pretty much never do, but they should. And then I would be like, oh, there's nobody on top of the point, let me go back then, right? But there is somebody defending the point, just literally not on top of the point. So write a radius of 50 meters, 100 meters, or whatever it would be. If there is a human player, or any unit within 50, 100 meters around the point, then don't go back to defend that point, right? If they go further than that, then you can go back, right? Because otherwise the AI would become too stupid and just too confused, like, should I go forward, should I not go forward, blah, 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 right? So that sort of check would definitely help. And also, let me briefly touch upon the campers, right, that just defend up the point, because CA encourages it, because what you get if you fight on top of a point is you get contesting time. And then if you have a lot of contesting time, you're like, oh, you contested the points, good. But it's often not good, because do we have an example happening right now? Not really. They're capturing C. Let's say we had units over there. Oh, I'll just go on to A, which the bot again camps for no reason because it's locked. It moved. The fuck? They're still camping B? No, they're moving from B as well. What is happening? Is it because they captured C? One of the bots is recalling back to the base. That almost never goes. No, everybody. And now they're going back to A. And now we're going to B. Oh, it's because the base became unlocked. So half of the team teleported back to the base. Yeah, see, the bots are so fucking stupid. So you should also write some code so that they don't do that, because they definitely heavily overcommit to defending the base. And it's because in the previous iteration, right, that iteration has been was written to counter the speedrunners, right? The speedrun would be you get cavalry or any unit, to be honest, just walk around the bots, because the bots just push straight forward from their spawning points into the nearest capture point. So you know where the spawning points are, you know what the straightforward line is. So just go around, right? And if you're a cavalry, you're much faster. Just bam, back up E, and go to the base, cap the base, and the bots would never go back. Or maybe they would, but never in enough numbers anyway. So this AI has been told to now recall literally half of the team back into the base once the base is even open for capture. So you see that the bots captured C, and immediately half of the team recalled back. So yeah, that's not very good. You definitely don't want that to happen in a PvP match. In a PvE, it's fine. Honestly, really nobody cares. But in PvP, if your bots would do that and throw a match because of that, you'd be really pissed off, right? So yeah, the AI should be smart enough not to throw away the matches, but definitely don't make it so good that it just carries the battle for the players, right? And none of the random average players can beat the AI, because I would also, I guess, kind of feel bad for them. It's like, oh, this AI is so good and I keep getting killed by it. But if you do, then what are you doing in PvP? I guess, I don't know, well, trying to have fun. So there's that. But if you're in PvP, it is also likely that you are going to sometimes be outplayed by human opponents. So whether you get outplayed by a human opponent or whether you are outplayed by an AI opponent, I don't know if that really matters. Anyway, the battle has ended, so let's jump into the second battle on the previous patch and let's just compare. Let's have a one-to-one comparison, exactly the same composition, everything exactly the same, other than the AI behavior. That is the old iteration of AI before all nerfs. Although one nerf has been applied, because I don't have the first iteration of AI, I have only the second one, and I think the second one was already changed. So this AI that you are going to see here might have it had their claws pulled out, I guess, but not the entire arms cut off. So there's a difference, because let's say the current AI has no arms, and this one just doesn't have its claws, and that's it. Or maybe they have been dulled down. Is that the correct word to use? Verb? I know the blade can be dull, but can the... Well, dull is just the opposite of sharp, so I'll just stick with that. Okay, and let's just do the same thing. I'll do the same thing as I did in the previous battle. I'll go around here, and I'll just compare the AI behavior. AI doesn't camp on top of a point, everything is pushing forward. So it's pretty much the same, but instead of half of the units camping in the point and half pushing, and vice versa on the other side, obviously, everybody is pushing. And if I were in a, let's say, 8v8 PvP battle with 2 bots on each side, then the bots would, well, one bot would camp A and one bot would camp B, and you would just have the same on the other side, D plus E, and you would have an 8v8 between players in the middle, but and the players would not be able to back up because of that. Right now I can just back up D, no problem, because all bots just push and I am able to speedrun. And this is something that I wanted to prevent happening in PvE, but this is PvP. As long as the entire team is not made of bots, you cannot get away with something like that, right? And also, I already said you can do, instead of having half of the units at random defend the point, when it sometimes happens, it's just all ranged units, and then have just one infantry unit left and everything else pushes. Let's see actually how the AI would behave. Oh, we are backupping anyway, our bots. Rangers just pushed in. I don't know, they didn't catch Hydra or something. Stuck past. But at least now there is nobody camping on B pointlessly. Just see how much better this is, like tactic-wise. And when it comes to cooperating with players, if those are human players alongside it, you would much rather have a bot that always pushes, always does something, rather than a bot that randomly might not do anything. Because let's say you are in a 10v10 battle, like they happen all the time. The bots really are just coming in if there is not enough human players, and the matchmaking tries its best to create as many full 10v10s as possible. Okay, let's see. because I know that AI, if I were to approach them from the back, like here, they would dispatch 1 or 2 units to defend the rears of all the other units that I am about to charge. So let's see if they're smart enough to do that. They're scapping deal with one cavalry that has snuck past. But if that was against human players would react to it, right? It's all just bots. So I'm trying to make a PvP argument over here, but it is just PvE. But I don't find recordings of how current bot iterations ruin the battles. I could also find you my old videos. Is that a disengage? No. So I think that was in the first iteration, and because this AI is already less aggressive, has been dumbed down so that the average players could deal with it. But it hasn't been, as I said, the arms were not completely cut off. But you can say I am the only human player over here, and I have a much easier time cooperating with this kind of AI than I would have with the previous iteration of AI. Well, not this is the previous. The previous of this video, so the current one that we have in the game. Let's maybe ignore the fact that AI essentially has covered itself. They backcapped E, they're backcapping D, and they also capped C. And now they're capping the base. Oh, we're getting wrecked in the base. But... So yeah, the AI would also do tricks like that when there is a blob. Let's say I wanted to approach them here. And it will also... Let's actually see if I can do the same trick I did previously. Just stand in front of a unit and it would just stare at me. Because if you manage in PvP, or even in PvE, because some bots not always... Okay, can you catch aggro on me? No, he's focused on the archers.
An enemy player has been eliminated.
Okay, now he got aggro on me. You see, he's not standing. He's... Is he chasing me or something? Okay. Yeah, that might have been changed. I think that is the change that they introduced here. Because the first iteration of AI would always push forward and always catch aggro. These guys kind of struggle, but it might be because of the guys around me. So I'm not 100% sure. But whichever is the case, you should also make sure that the new iteration of AI, because I want CA to update the AI in one of the upcoming patches to improve the situation in the arena. So write it so that AI cannot be abused like that. Because I had situations where, let's say, AI doesn't defend the point, and I go in and I back up the point, and I just stand, I can just stand here at the edge of the point, right? And the AI that has gone back to defend the point, instead of getting inside the point and contesting it and defending it, it just stands like that in front of me and just looks at me. I was like, okay, I have time. I'm capping your point. I don't have to move anywhere. You should be the one moving. Right? So yeah, that's another change. So let's just summarize, and I'll end the video here. So, make it so that AI either pushes with everything or just defends with one melee unit, and only if there is no human player doing it. So yeah, either minimal point defense by bots or none at all. Make them actually aggressive so that, you know, when they approach you like this, they would actually attack you instead of just staring you down, right? And expose their rear to the archers. That's not good. That should also not happen. So make sure they catch aggro on enemy units properly, like they did. It's not like I am expecting CA to do something impossible or do something that they have never done before. They have already achieved that, and then they reverted it back. Because an aggressive AI that catches aggro was too much for new players that play PvE. But when you play PvP, when you go into a PvP battle, your expectations are much different. So you cannot just apply the PvE AI to PvP matches and call it a day, which is what CA did. And it was pissing me off previously, because sometimes I would have Oh, see? That's the behavior I was talking about. Instead of catching aggro on this unit that charged in, this unit is disengaging to prevent this unit from recharging the blob and getting after the archer. So now it caught aggro properly. It just doesn't always do that. And in the new iteration, pretty much never does. So, yeah. That's something I like to see from AI. Previously, when I, for example, played ranged units, I would go around the blob like that. Let's say it's an engagement over like here. I would go with my ranges down, over here and start shooting them in the back. Instead of letting themselves being shot in the back, they would disengage with one unit. They would still hold the melee front line. They would disengage one unit, and they would use that one unit to chase me away, to prevent me from shooting them in the back, which is pretty good. This is something that a good average player, okay, there's not something, you're either good or you're average, because the average, sadly, is not good in Arena, at least from my perspective, by my standards of judging what's good and what's not. You can feel free to disagree, you have different perspective, that's fine. So yeah, don't camp the points, or just camp with one melee unit, and only if a human player is not present. Within 50 or 100 meters radius around the point as well, write that check. Make sure the AI catches aggro properly and cannot just be abused and kited, that when it comes back to defend the point actually gets in that point. And that it can use actual commander and unit abilities, because if it doesn't, then you're just fighting an unfair fight from the very beginning. Right, so make AI use abilities, make them push forward, and make them not be completely stupid, camp in the middle of a point and just get shot by ranged units for no reason. Yeah. And I guess about the capture point, then I've rather not finished my fault, right? The CA just encourages you to get sort of time spent contesting waypoints, puts you higher on the scoreboard, and then and it rewards you for doing the wrong thing, because the right thing is to stop the enemy before the enemy gets into the point, because that way you're still getting points per second that count towards victory. And if you don't do that and let them on top of the point, you yourself are getting more points, like yes, good player, you're doing good, but you aren't. You're doing the wrong thing and you're rewarded for the wrong thing. But very often contesting a point is the right thing, right? So sometimes it's the wrong thing, sometimes it's the bad thing, but it's always rewarded, which is, in my opinion, wrong. And I should never have said in my opinion, because that's redundant. Everything I say is in my opinion. Why have I did that? Why haven't I done that? That's stupid. I'm stupid. Anyway, that's the end of the video. Takeaway is, Mr. is stupid, don't listen to him, don't improve AI, leave it as it is, good job CA. Yes. See you on the Arena's Battlefields, Commanders.